Hello, friends. This is the image of a west wind blown land, the waters, and the skies. And this is again a lecture in the series of the ones entitled Gyandu 2.0, the initiative of the Commissionerate of College Education, Government of Rajasthan, wherein we are providing some study material to you, and the poem to be studied today is a furtherance in the explanation of the Ode to the West Wind written by Percy Byssche Shelley. We realized in the first lecture that this poem is an address which is an emotional one, still highly serious, and the topic being dealt with in an elevated manner, logically and clearly, and in a complex way. So the poem begins with the address to the west wind as powerful, and we see the powers of the west wind exercised on the earth, that the leaves and the seeds are buried with a strength not possessed by any human being. The whole earth is covered with leaves and with seeds for a regeneration, and the poet requests the west wind to listen to him. Now, thou on whose stream, mid the steep sky's commotion, loose clouds like earth's decaying leaves are shed. If you may just look back at the first image that I showed you, that everything appears to be distraught. The earth is distraught because there are leaves and seeds piling on each other as though with the suppression of the wind to be buried deep down. So also on its stream. On whose stream? On the stream means flow. On the flow of the west wind, the middle sky, steep sky, suffers a commotion. Commotion is अफरा तफरी. बादलों में भी अफरा तफरी है. Loose clouds are like the earth's decaying leaves are shed. Clouds have been scattered. There aren't big clouds hanging in the sky. The clouds also have been broken and shattered to float on the sky as the leaves. And these clouds seem to have been shaken from the tangled boughs of heaven and ocean. So how do the clouds form? The clouds form when the ocean sends up vapors and they stand somewhere in the heaven. As a romantic poet, we see Shelley at his best. He has got a majestic, romanticizing quality. हमारे मन में एक AWE, एक वंडर स्ट्रक हमको कर दे रहे हैं. हम एकदम विस्मय में भर जाते हैं कि कितना सुंदर चित्रण है ये. ये क्लाउड्स जो हैं, दे आर एंजल्स ऑफ रेन एंड लाइटनिंग. These clouds that have been scattered by the wind, they definitely are going to bring rain and lightning. There are spread on the blue surface on thine airy surge. Surge is a rise. So the wind has risen high and it is like holding the skies on its tops, holding the clouds on its top, like the bright hair uplifted from the head of some fierce Maenad. Maenad is a god of wine, Greek god of wine. तो जैसे शराब का देवता मस्त हो गया हो, और उसके बाल पूरे बिखर गए हो नशे में. सो लाइक अ फियर्स मैनर्ड, जो बादल हैं आकाश में, उनकी तुलना की गई है. देयर इज द सिमिली with the usage of the word like. The hair are like the hair of, like from the head of some fierce maned, even from the dim verge of the horizon to the zenith's height. The clouds are scattered where? From the horizon. Horizon is the place where the earth and the sky meet, and zenith is the place where the ocean and the waters and the sky meet. So he draws an arch, a complete arch, from this point of earth to that point of earth. So from everywhere to everywhere, you can just see the clouds, the locks of the approaching storm. Locks are tufts of air. So it appears as if this fierce maned is now about to proclaim rain on earth. जमीन पर सोच चुके हैं ये मैनेड, बादलों के जो मैनेड्स हैं, कि अब ये स्टॉर्म लाएंगे. Thou dirge of the dying air. What is dirge? Dirge is the song sung at the death of someone. तो ये बादल ऐसा लग रहा है कि गाना गाने वाले हैं. किसका गाना? डेथ का गाना. किसकी डेथ का? ईयर की डेथ का. साल खत्म हो रहा है. टू विच दिस क्लोजिंग नाइट विल बी द डोम ऑफ अ वास्ट सेपल्कर. Sepulchre is a dome. We all know that graves are covered with rounded structures, domes. So the earth, the whole earth with the leaves and the seeds, has become a grave, and the sky has become the cover of this grave. Vaulted with all thy congregated might of vapors. Thy is for the west wind, and the west wind is exercising all its powers to bring down the clouds of vapors, from whose solid atmosphere black rain and fire and hail will burst. Certainty has been proclaimed in the verb will. इतना दबाव बन गया है पृथ्वी पर बादलों का कि अब जरूर काली बारिश आएगी और फायर आएगा इन द फॉर्म ऑफ लाइटनिंग एंड हेल. सॉलिड पीसेस ऑफ वाटर विल फॉल ऑन अर्थ. अगेन सेमीकोलन एंड अगेन ओ हियर. So this stanza also ends with a request to the west wind to listen to the poet. So in this stanza, we have seen the impact of west wind as experienced by the skies. Now that is not enough. It is not that the west wind will exercise its power on the earth and the sky. It does not spare even the waters. In this stanza, in the third stanza, we will read the powers of the west wind on the waters. Thou, he addresses again the west wind and says, you who did wake from his summer dreams the blue Mediterranean. Mediterranean is a sea where he lay. Mediterranean also has been personified. The west wind has been personified as a power, as a monster, celestial monster, because it comes from the skies. Also the Mediterranean has been termed as a monster. So he said, you have touched the blue Mediterranean, and this Mediterranean was until now lying, lulled by the coil of the crystalline streams. So streams were falling into the Mediterranean and it was being lulled. Lulled is as put to a tranquility. ललबी होती है लोरी, और वो मधुर स्ट्रीम्स जो आ रही थी, क्रिस्टलाइन क्लियर स्ट्रीम्स, नहरें जो आके मेडिटेरेनियन में उसको सुला रही थी गाना गाते हुए, उसको तुमने जगा दिया है. यू हैव वेकन फ्रॉम हिज समर ड्रीम्स beside a pumice isle in Byssche Bay. This is describing the geography of the place. There is a bay nearby. Bay is a piece of water that moves into the land. So you have disturbed the Mediterranean so much so that it is gushing on to move onto the earth. And in this Mediterranean, when it was lulled, he saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day. अभी तक ये मेडिटेरेनियन सपने देख रहा था क्योंकि उसका पानी स्थिर था. When can you see? When can the reflection of palaces and towers be seen in the water? Only when the waters are still. But you have come and disturbed it. All overgrown with azure moss and flowers so sweet. So azure is blue. In this water, blue moss and flowers were growing. The sense faints picturing them. My sense is incapable now. I cannot really present the beauty that was reflected in the water of the Mediterranean. But you, thou, for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms. So when you come and touch the Atlantic also, what to talk about this Mediterranean? When you touch the Atlantic, its level, cleave themselves. Cleave is make space for, into chasms. Chasms are deep pits. दरारें पड़ा देते हो. वेस्ट विंड, तुमने अटलांटिक ओशन को भी अपने दबाव के नीचे क्लीव करने पर मजबूर कर दिया है, फट जाने पर मजबूर कर दिया है. While far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean know thy voice and suddenly grow grey with fear and tremble and despoil themselves. So the Mediterranean that was lying deep in a sleep, lulled by the crystalline streams, and even the Atlantic, it divides itself. And now we can see clearly the sapless foliage of the ocean. Sapless is non-green. Foliage are plants. So now can be seen the non-green plants of the ocean. And they seem to know your voice and suddenly grow grey with fear. तुम्हारी आवाज़ से उनमें भी आतंक आ गया. And tremble, सारे समुद्र के अंदर भी हलचल हो गई है. And despoil themselves. And again the semicolon, and the poet says, oh, here, listen to me. So what is there in the third stanza? The third stanza explains the impact of the west wind upon the water bodies. The water bodies of the Mediterranean Sea, which was sleeping until now. So seas are small bodies. That is affected, but not only the Mediterranean, the Atlantic levels also. You exercise your power on the Atlantic, and the water plants that grow there seem to tremble so much so that they could have been green, but now they turn sapless. Now they turn non-green and turn grey with fear. So in this stanza you can see yet another color of nature being talked about. When Shelley was talking about the earth. He talked about the yellow, the green, the pale, and the red color, the black color of the leaves that lay dead. When he talks about the impact upon the sky, he talks about the black and the white, lifeless clouds scattered on the sky. And now he brings the color of grey. So we see that the colors have very operatively and very sensuously been employed in the poem. The third stanza again ends with the pleading of "O here." The poet exclaims and wants the wind to stop a bit and listen to him. And what does he have to say? When he has explained about the might of the west wind on earth, the skies and the waters, what does he want to say to the west wind? He says, "If I were a dead leaf, thou mightest bear. If I were," a sentence that begins with "if I were," or "you were," or they were, this is indicative of a reality that it does not have that quality. It indicates a situation which is imaginary. So the poet, now comes the pleading of the poet. अब कवि वो कह रहे हैं जो वो पहले स्टैंजा के अंत में और दूसरे स्टैंजा के अंत में और तीसरे स्टैंजा के अंत में क्या बोलना चाह रहे थे वेस्ट विंड को. वो बोल रहे हैं, इफ आई वर अ डेड लीफ, काश मैं एक मरी पत्ती होता जिसे तुम उठा लेते. जो what was explained in the first stanza. If I were a swift cloud to fly with thee, if only I could fly with you, which was suggested in the second stanza, or a wave to pant beneath your power. Panting is breathing heavily. When someone is exercising a pressure on something from top, you tend to pant. So if I were a dead leaf or a cloud or a wave and share the impulse of thy strength, if you could give me little bit of your strength, if I could share the impulse of your strength, only less free than thou. The only difference between you and I and me is that I am less free than thou. He makes a comparison here. Oh, uncontrollable, again the exclamation mark. He addresses the west wind as uncontrollable. जो पहला शब्द उन्होंने यूज किया था wild, the next word for the west wind is uncontrollable. If even I were as in my boyhood, and could be the comrade of thy wanderings over heaven, as then, when to outstrip thy sky speeds scarce seemed a vision. So he said, there are three things that he says: if I were a dead leaf, if I were a swift cloud, if I were a wave. And then he says, if even I were, as in my boyhood. So here he strikes a comparison between the west wind and his boyhood. He says, when I was a boy, I was as strong as you are. I could then be a comrade. Comrade is companion of your wandering over heaven. And then I could outstrip. Outstrip is prove better than. In my childhood, I was very strong. I was very fast. I was also uncontrollable. So I would outstrip the sky speed, and at that time, it scarce seemed a vision. At that time, it was not beyond my imagination to be so fast and so uncontrollable as you are. I would never have striven as thus with thee in prayer in my sore need. At that time, in my childhood, I never prayed to you. But now, I am not that uncontrollable. I am in a sore, deadly need. Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. And the poet requests the west wind to lift him. These are very important lines, and they form the core of this ode. The poet addresses the west wind and says, please lift me as a wave, because you can lift. Waves are very heavy. No one can lift a wave. Leaves, if they are in multitudes, become very heavy. And clouds, it is beyond our imagination to lift them. But a wind does it. विंड कर सकता है, उनको उठा सकता है. तो वो बोल रहे हैं, मुझे भी उठा लो. I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. So the long sentences that he was using have now been reduced to a smaller size because he is panting himself. He is unable to speak. He is unable to cope with the speed of the wind and says, I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed. A heavy weight of hours has chained and bowed one too like thee. He says, it is not years. देखो पोएट ये नहीं बोल रहे हैं मुझे मेरे वर्षों के, मेरी उम्र के वर्षों ने मुझे दबा दिया है. वो बोल रहे हैं मुझे घंटों ने दबा दिया है. So when you are going to calculate your life in hours, it would be very big. So the poet says, I am in such a pitiful condition. Every hour is putting its weight upon me. It has chained and bowed someone who was like you. What are the qualities that I had like yours? Tameless and swift and proud. So the poet reminisces, he remembers, he recalls back the time when he was tameless, just like the west wind, and swift, also just like the west wind, and proud, too, like the west wind. So this fourth stanza is identification of self with the west wind. इस स्टैंजा में कवि ने अपना और वेस्ट विंड के बीच में एक समानता बताने की कोशिश की है. ये समानता इस एज में नहीं है, लेकिन चाइल्डहुड टाइम था. सो द पोएट सेज, प्लीज लिफ्ट मी. व्हाई शुड यू लिफ्ट मी? मेक मी दाई लायर, मेक मी योर म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट. सो when the wind passes through the forests and makes the leaves falls, it makes a very beautiful noise. When it passes through the clouds, again the lightning, the thunder makes a noise. And when it moves on the water bodies, again a noise is created. So he says, move through me. अभी भी मुझ में कुछ चिंगारी बची हुई है. Move over me, make me thy lyre, even as the forest is. Just as the forest is resonating with your movement, even I may resonate. What if my leaves are falling like its own? Please don't mind if my leaves are falling like the leaves in the forest. The tumult of thy mighty harmonies will take from both a deep autumnal tone. You, the tumult that you have, you can take from both what? The forest and the poet. you can take from both of us our deep autumnal tone, autumnal, death-like, sweet, though in sadness. A beautiful opposites, employment of the two opposites together in an alliteration. Sweet, sadness. So if you take away all my dead things from me, it would be sweet. Although it would be sad, but I will believe it to be sweet. Be thou, spirit fierce, my spirit. So he again addresses, this is what he is wanting to make the west wind to listen. He says, you be my spirit, O fierce spirit. Be thou me, impetuous one. O powerful one, become me. Drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to quicken a new birth. Carry away all my dead thoughts. When he says that I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed, that means he is overcome with a kind of pessimism. निराशा हो गई है उन्हें, ये वर्षों के बोझ ने उनको घंटों के बोझ ने उनको दबा के रख दिया है. सो ही सेज मेरे इन सारे मरी हुई चीज़ों को हटा दो जिससे कि एक न्यू बर्थ क्विकन हो जाए. And by the incantation of this verse, so blow from my lips, so that when I am writing down this verse is the only old English word for poem. In this verse, scatter as from an unextinguished hearth, ashes and sparks. A very beautiful comparison, simile has been employed again, just as when a wind blows and hearth is fireplace, fire. So when unextinguished is something that has not been put off, that is still blazing. So in this fire which is blazing in me, scatter all my ashes and sparks. My words must reach the mankind. Be through my lips to unawakened earth the trumpet of a prophecy. Move over my lips and carry away the words which are lying stuck on my lips and I am unable to proclaim to the world. Please carry them, be through my lips. And what is the prophecy? What is prophecy? A prophecy is a proclamation, a declaration about future. भविष्यवाणी. सो मेरे मुंह से भविष्यवाणी करा दो, दुनिया को सुना दो. ओ विंड, प्लीज सुना दो लोगों को. इफ विंटर कम्स, कैन स्प्रिंग बी फार बिहाइंड. This is a very beautiful prophetic note. Who is a prophet? Prophet is a person who can make prophecies. Prophet is a person who possesses nothing but still is believed to give to the world everything. So he assumes this prophetic dimension and says that on my lip sits this prophecy, a scientific fact that if winter comes, can spring be far behind? If winter has come, spring definitely would follow. The poem has ended in a note just the opposite of what was there in the beginning. The poem started with telling that this autumn has brought death on earth, in skies and in water. And somewhere in among these three forces of the earth, sky and the water sits the poet identifying himself with the wild west wind. You can only talk to someone who is your equal. So the poet finds something of a likeness in the west wind and says that I was also swift and wild and proud like you in my childhood. If you can scatter my ashes and the sparks, I will blaze forth. I can still bring back the fire element in me, which is sitting on my lip. Just spread it, just as you have spread the leaves, the waves, and the clouds. So also, please scatter my idea, my prophecy, that when winter symbolizes death and spring symbolizes rebirth. So if death has visited the earth, spring cannot be far behind. The poem ends in a question. But this is a rhetoric. Rhetoric is a literary device when, though the structure appears to be a question, but this is an answer by itself. The answer is winter comes, so also spring will come. I hope you have tried to see this poem as an ode, as an address to the west wind, because the poet can see in the wind the power to be a destroyer and a preserver, and which has the capacity to take away death from the earth, to bring a rebirth, death from the skies, to bring hail and storm and lightning, to take away death from the sea and give to it a tranquility. So also should it bring life to the poet who is the maker of a prophecy. He is capable of prophesying the real natural fact, and it is cyclic, that when there is death, rebirth will come in turn, soon following. Admiration of this quality of west wind, which is also like the admiration of the same quality in the poet. Only the world has refused to see his caliber. He needs the power. He beseeches the west wind to endow upon him this quality of rebirth. So, I shall one day definitely talk about Shelley as the prophetic poet, or prophetic note in the poems of Shelley. Hope to see you then. Thank you for now.